This video brought to you by Prehistoric Scenes at prehistoricscenes.net. Finally, I've gotten moved into the new space and got my hobby workbench put together. Finally. And I have been jonesing to get back to building and painting models. And this is the next one. This is the Triceratops from the Age of Dinosaurs line by AMT. Now, I haven't built any of AMT's dinosaur models. I have built, I believe they did the Star Trek models in the 70s and 80s, and I have built some of those. So we're going to see how this goes. Now, it doesn't come with a base, and it doesn't come with a nameplate. So I'm going to have to figure those things out. But I've got some ideas. As far as the color scheme goes, I'm going to continue on with this. Now, this is a set of Triceratops that I did for as a study for a kit that I got from Kayakasaurus, which was a set of dinosaur eggs, or Triceratops eggs, actually. You can see their little Triceratops heads poking out of the eggs, and it's a cute little kit. Anyway, being that I'm in Texas, I happen to be fond of longhorns, and particularly their coloration. Now, Triceratops was significantly larger than, modern cattle. But still, it's conceivable that a big animal would have similar coloration. So that's what I'm going to go with. And nobody knows what they actually look like, so I'm going to do what I want. Anyway, so let's get into it. Let's see what this kit's all about. Let's go ahead and start with an unboxing. So I have opened the box up, but haven't taken the parts out yet. Here's our instructions with a little blurb about the Triceratops and something telling you to read the instructions and a few other little building notes. And it looks pretty simple. You've got the legs in two parts, the body in two parts, and the head assembly, and then the final assembly. So it doesn't look too difficult. I do think there's going to be a fair amount of puttying and sanding going on, but that's par for the course. Let me go ahead and we have our parts here. Let's see what we've got. All right. A little caution label. If I can't survive at my age building models, I don't think any caution label is going to help me. Alright, so looks like we've got some legs and feet and some horns. There's one body half. Let's see if we can get the rest of this here. Alright. That's a foot. Part of a horn. This looks like, well, I was going to say the nose horn, but I guess this is the tongue. That's what it probably is. That looks like that would go together something like that. Or this. Oh no, this goes, well, we'll look at the instructions and see how it comes about, but Anyway, I think there's a jaw somewhere, lower jaw. All right, let's see how, I'm just going to test fit here because this will tell me how much sanding and putting I'm going to have to do. This doesn't look too bad. Let me see what the underside looks like. Well, there's definitely going to be some stuff on the underside. The top side, though, doesn't look too bad. So, okay. Well, I am going to do some preliminary work and then get into building. Let's talk about pre-visualization. I liken this sort of like to storyboards. You know, with a storyboard, if you've ever done any filmmaking, storyboards are a really useful tool because you, as Ridley Scott would say, you absorb yourself in story and you're making editorial decisions. So it's a really powerful tool. But you're not locked into the storyboard. You know, if you discover something on the day that's better, you'll be able to recognize it because you've done your storyboarding. You know, you can choose to abandon it, but at least you know what to abandon and when. And so I do something very similar. And so I'll do a sketch a lot of times that I'll do in color with colored pens or colored pencils. I have taken lately to doing painting. Granted, it's me painting, is kind of amateurish, but hey, that's the only way you get better is to do a lot of it. And then I'll take a toy version of the subject. In this case, I've got this toy of Triceratops, and I'll paint that up, and that'll give me a chance to practice my paint job before I do the actual model. So I'm going to pose this and take some pictures and use that to help me get the sketch together to then do the painting. So that's the next step. So the first thing I did was to take some photos of the toy version of the Triceratops to get the composition down and get the right angle to use that for the sketch. I then started working on the painting, and I put it in the sky first, and I really liked the sky that I had. Unfortunately, later I made some mistakes, and then a lot of that got covered over. I then outlined it and then slowly started working in the shading and the details, and just kept working it until it got where I could live with it. Because you never completely get it to perfection. You just get to a point where you can live with something. And eventually I worked in the ground features and got the painting done. Then it was time to move to painting the toy Triceratops. And like the painting, I used the same paints that I'm going to use for the actual model. And I really, and this is part of my regular process, to use toy versions to test out the paint job, because that's three-dimensional, and you know, you can do washes and dry brushes, you know, and work it back and forth until eventually you get something that you're happy with, and it gives you a good solid idea of where you want to go with the paint job. One of the first things I do with a kit is to clean the parts, because there could be some residual release agent from the injection molding process. To do that, I squirt it down with some Windex, wipe it all down, then come back with some water, spray that down, and wipe it all down again. Now, I am probably going to have to clean these parts again after I fill gaps and do some sanding and filing, but you know, I like to start with a clean kit. I can always go back and clean again. So the assembly was pretty straightforward. I used, you know, just some Tamiya cement to put it together. I didn't follow the instructions directly. I did assembly here and assembly there. And once you've done a lot of models and you get a sense of what you can skip ahead to, you can do that. And I certainly did on this. Some of that is because I'm going to be doing puttying and I want to putty and sand parts before the final assembly. So I got everything into pre assemblies and then later did the final assembly.
Finally, I was able to get to the painting, which, to be honest, is my favorite part of the model making process. I enjoy the rest of it too, but I really like painting. And to kick it off, I used some of the color primer from Army Painter in Oak Brown. And I've really liked using these color primers lately because I feel like they bring the primer game up to a new level. And I also feel like colored primers support the paint job you're going to put over it better than sometimes, a gray or a black or a white would. After that, I wanted to get into the recesses and cracks and crevices and the shadows there. So to define those, I hit it all over with a wash of Vallejo Model Color Camouflage Black Brown. And then to do something very similar to what people do with model aircraft is to do some pre-shading. For that, I did a dry brush of some either cream or ivory. I don't remember which. So you've got a real high contrast paint on the model that once you go to put those other colors on, especially with washes, it'll help support the depth that you want in your paint job. So after that, I wanted to first hit the counter shading. And the counter shading, if you look at a lot of animals, they have a light colored underbelly and under their legs and necks and tails, and that's to create an optical illusion that makes them more difficult for predators to see when they're looking at them on the horizon. After doing that, I started working on the top side, which was mostly the cavalry brown mixed in with a little bit of amaranth red and occasionally some carmine red, and did a lot of both washes and dry brushes to get it to where I wanted it. For the horns and the claws or hooves and the beak, I used various iterations of some of the basalt gray, the camouflage black brown, some of the medium sea gray, and occasionally to get the effect of striations with a very stiff bristle brush, used a bit of the cream white just to get the effect of striations on the tip of the horns. I use some more of that or use some black gray just to get, because on a lot of animal horns they're not quite black but approaching black at the tips. For the eyes, because eyes don't naturally show up as pure white, I use some cream white, and then to get the a base color for the iris, I used some infantry blue and then came over that with some sky blue because I wanted a nice contrast between the eyes and the cavalry brown of the body. Then I took a little toothpick and put in a dot of black for the pupil, and then a smaller dot of white for reflection to give it a little life. And lastly, on the eyes, to get a natural look to them, because eyes have tears and that makes them look glossy, I use some Tamiya clear to give it a little bit of gloss and a little bit of life to it. Unfortunately, this kit did not come with a base, which I find particularly disappointing. So I had to make my own. So I did get 7x9 wood plaque from the hobby store to use as the base for that. And I wanted to give it kind of a museum look, so I hit it with some Krylon brass spray paint. Once that was dry, I masked that off with some blue painter's tape and then went to work on the terrain itself. And I wanted kind of a slope for it to stand majestically on. So I used some insulation foam, and I've never worked with this before. And in hindsight, I probably should have invested in one of these hot wire cutters that I see people use. So I ended up just using a knife. It worked. I got it to the shape I pretty much wanted it. And once it was shaped, I then used some Elmer's wood glue to glue it to the base. After that, to get some texture to it, I used some Woodland Scenics light white hydrocal plaster mixed in with some of their moldacine plaster because it has kind of a more of a coarse texture, and worked that up. And once that was dry, I then once again used the Army Painter Color Primer Oak Brown to get the base color. And after that, I wanted kind of two tiers. You know, if you see like on a cliff face, there's these lines of, or there are these lines of like different layers of sediment, you know, and where different things happen. You know, maybe there was a volcano and you see this dark line across the cliff face or what have you. And I saw an image that I used for a reference that I really liked. So there was a combination of, well, first of all, I coat it with some Vallejo model color camouflage black brown, again to get those dark shadows and recesses, and then started working with a combination of leather brown and one layer, and then cream white, and you know, the medium sea gray for the other layers. And so I had like 4 layers. My girlfriend said it looked like a very rough Oreo cookie, and I could kind of see that, at least at where it was at that point. Once I got the layers of paint, I then used some various terrain, sand, and rocks to give that more texture along that cliff face, and painted it up a little bit more. When I was happy with that, I then used some of the Woodland Scenics coarse turf on the top of it and used Elmer's glue to glue that down. And then I could finally have my Triceratops majestically mount the cliff face. So there we go. Now, this kit did not come with a nameplate, which I also find deeply disappointing. So off camera, I spray painted with the brass Krylon a little piece of wood, and I recently had some nameplate holders made and sprayed that with the Krylon as well, again to give it that nice museum look. And then I printed out a nameplate for it and glued that down onto the brass wood piece to get myself a nameplate.
All right, so the AMT Triceratops is done. I didn't glue them down because I've moved a number of times, and if I move again, it'll be easier to not have it attached. But anyway, fun little kit to build. It could have been engineered with more pegs to help with alignment issues, but I was able to make it work. The feet were hollow on the underside, so I had to putty that up. That just seems like lazy model engineering to me, but I persevered. Anyway, I am still going with the longhorn coloration that I did on my Kayakasaurus Triceratops eggs build, because it struck me as, an animal of that size would have similar coloring to an animal of that size. Actually, the longhorn is probably a bit smaller. The Triceratops is probably a couple of times larger than that, but close enough. Anyway, so I'm pleased with the paint job on this. And I also did some experimenting with terrain, and I'm still new to terrain. One of the things I experimented with was doing different soil layers. I saw a picture where there was different layers of soil, and I really liked that, so I applied it here. I had thought about doing like some roots coming from the underside, and some tall grass and some bluebonnets. I decided not to do that this time around. I got to this point and I liked where it was at. And sometimes it's important to know when to stop, and this is where I chose to stop. Anyway, so this is the AMT Triceratops. Thank you for joining me on this adventure, and I'm not sure what the next adventure is going to be. I think it may be a Delft dinosaur. What is a Delft dinosaur? Well, you'll just have to tune in to see. I think that's going to be the next one, but maybe something else. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and come back again for the next adventure. Take care.